Before Roman rule. The area we are focusing on includes the Eastern Carpathians, historical Transylvania, Moldavia, and Wallachia. The first well-distinguished ethnic group living in this region was the Dacians. The history of the Dacians dates back to around 1000 BC. Early written sources, including Herodotus, mention them. This unity extended to the eastern part of the Carpathian Basin, Galicia, and Bessarabia as well. However, it did not remain unchanged, as already in the 8th century BC, Eastern ethnic groups appeared here, most likely European Scythians. This newly arrived population quickly merged with the indigenous inhabitants. The history of the Wallachian territories developed somewhat differently. Most of Wallachia was uninhabited. Herodotus described this area as a wasteland. This barren zone was part of a stretch of uninhabited land extending all the way to Transdanubia. It was only in the 4th century BC that settlement began. In the western part, Celts settled. Moving eastward, we can also observe Celtic influences in the territory of Transylvania. The Geta tribes living along the lower Danube played an increasingly significant role here, along with the Greek colonial cities on the shores of the Black Sea. After these events, the kingdom of Burebista was established. In the 1st century BC, the southern part of the Balkan Peninsula was already under Roman rule. Macedonia had been a Roman province since 148 BC. Along the Black Sea coast, there were Greek cities, while to the west, the Celts were present. By 60 BC, Burebista was certainly in power. He attacked and conquered the Greek cities between 55 and 48 BC. His was a multi-ethnic empire, but in 45 BC, a rebellion broke out against him. Burebista became a victim of this uprising. Julius Caesar intended to take advantage of this situation and gathered an army against the Dacians. However, the campaign never took place, as he was assassinated on March 15, 44 BC. After Burebista, power over the Dacians fell into the hands of a high priest named Decanius. Following his death, a ruler named Cotiso came to power around 31 BC. However, in 29 BC, Lucius Crassus, the governor of Macedonia, crushed his army, and for a long time afterward, there were no recorded Dacian raids. During the Pannonian War between 13 and 11 BC, however, the Dacians reappeared, launching an incursion into Pannonia. Marcus Vinicius led a campaign against them and defeated them. After this, the Dacian kingdom fragmented into 5 smaller principalities. In the following decades, the ethnic composition of these 5 principalities changed significantly. This transformation was due to the Sarmatian migration pouring into the lower Danube region from the Eastern European steppes. The Dacians essentially lost their territories along the Danube. As a result, Dacian power was confined to a much smaller area. The Iazyges pushed the Dacians away from the Mureș River, and there are sources indicating that the Iazyges occupied the entire Banat region. Following the arrival of the Iazyges, the Dacians were confined to the territory of Transylvania. At this time, the Dacians and the Romans maintained good relations. Nevertheless, in early 69 AD, the Dacians invaded Moesia and occupied military camps there. They remained until Mucianus drove them back. Peaceful relations persisted until the mid-80s AD. The Dacian Wars and the fate of Dacia. During the winter of 85 to 86 AD, the Dacians unexpectedly attacked Moesia. Emperor Domitian himself arrived at the scene. While waging war against the Germanic tribes along the Rhine, Domitian crossed the river and annexed the territory between the Rhine and the Danube, forcing the inhabitants to pay a tithe. This region became known as Agridecumates. A similar move against the Marcomanni and the Quadi may have been foreshadowed by the concentration of troops in Pannonia, which also served as a direct prelude to the Dacian Wars. Thus, the Dacian incursions into Moesia appear to have been preemptive military operations. The swift redeployment of Roman forces allowed them to continue the war against the Dacians, who had been expelled from Moesia. Cornelius Fuscus led a campaign along the Danube and then along the Olt River against the Dacians, but suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Red Tower Pass. By this time, Decebalus had become the king of the Dacians. Sources describe him as a wise diplomat and an excellent military leader. In 88 AD, the newly appointed Roman commander Tedius Julianus advanced against the Dacians through the Banat region and inflicted a devastating defeat on the Dacian army at the Iron Gates of Transylvania. However, the campaign was interrupted because Domitian marched against the Marcomanni and the Quadi, withdrawing troops from Julianus. The Marcomanni, however, defeated the Roman army, and in 89 AD, Domitian was forced to halt the campaign and agree to a peace treaty. As a result of this treaty, the Dacians became a client state of Rome. They received large sums of money, a high stipendium, and skilled artisans in exchange for peace. Trajan's Dacian campaigns. The next major events were Trajan's campaigns against the Dacians. In reality, Trajan launched his wars without any clear justification. As historians note, he simply could not tolerate having to pay tribute to the Dacians each year. From 88 AD to 101 AD, the Dacians remained a Roman client state. There is no evidence that Decebalus acted hostilely toward Rome during this period. It was a time of peace. Trade flourished, goods arrived from the Roman Empire, and Roman coins began circulating in Dacia. In the period immediately preceding the Roman conquest, the kingdom of Dacia was home not only to Dacians, but also to Celts, Scythians, and Sarmatians, making it an ethnically mixed region. Province of Dacia Augusti. In the spring of 101 AD, the Romans launched an offensive against Decebalus's kingdom. This was a peculiar situation, as the Roman legions were marching against one of Rome's own client states, one that did not even wish to go to war. It was only after the first campaign that Trajan decided to permanently annex the Dacian kingdom into the empire. After the First War, Roman garrisons remained stationed in the kingdom. What could have motivated Trajan to launch this campaign? In addition to the emperor's personal ambitions, another key factor was the dire financial state of the empire at the time. By the end of the Second Dacian War, however, Rome's financial situation had improved significantly. After the Second War concluded, Trajan transformed Dacia into a Roman province in 106 AD. That same year, the first colony was founded, and road construction began. Dacia's final borders and internal organization were established around 119 AD. Interestingly, the newly founded province saw an unusually large influx of settlers. This was the result of a deliberate, and in part forced, resettlement policy. Trajan relocated newly enfranchised citizens from all over the empire to Dacia. Why was this massive resettlement necessary? The war had depleted the male population of Dacia. Our source for this information is Eutropius, who notably mentions only the loss of men. Furthermore, even in Trajan's time, rumors circulated about the total extermination of the Dacians. Inscriptions containing names of individuals from the period of Roman rule in Dacia reveal that thousands of people bore Latin, Greek, Syrian, Illyrian, or Celtic names, but only 10 to 20 people had Thracian names, suggesting they might have been of Dacian origin. The Dacians did not contribute at all to the process of Romanization in Dacia. The abandonment of the province. The last 50 years of Dacia's history as a Roman province were marked by repeated barbarian invasions and a gradual, then total evacuation of its population. In 238 AD, the Goths ravaged the Danubian provinces of the empire, pushing the remaining Dacians and Carpi westward. The Carpi made multiple attempts to seize Roman territory, with renewed invasions occurring in 245 to 247 AD. Dacia effectively ceased to be a part of the Roman Empire when Emperor Philippus Arabs achieved a victory over the Carpi in 247 AD, adopting the title Carpicus as a mark of his triumph. Officially, Dacia was abandoned under Emperor Aurelian, who ruled from 271 to 275 AD. However, the process had already begun under Philippus Arabs, when the northern defensive lines of the province were given up in 247 to 248 AD. By 258 AD, no new Roman inscriptions appear in the province, and by the 260s, no significant Roman military presence remained in Dacia. By 271 AD, Aurelian's forces merely had to evacuate the remnants of Roman authority, confirming that a complete depopulation had taken place. The relocated inhabitants were settled in two newly established provinces, Dacia Ripensis and Dacia Mediterranea. No evidence of continuous settlement exists in the former province of Dacia. No Latin place names have survived. All Roman-era names have vanished entirely. After Dacia's evacuation, no Latin-speaking communities remain to pass on Roman place names to later peoples. The region underwent multiple large-scale population replacements. Consequently, no form of Daco-Roman continuity can be supported. By the late 3rd century, the Latin spoken in Dacia closely resembled the Latin of Pannonia and Dalmatia, but by the 3rd century, the province had become heavily Hellenized. After the Roman withdrawal, Dacia did not become a wasteland. By the mid-3rd century, the Carpi had settled in the eastern part of the former province. However, by 271 AD, no Latin-speaking Romans remained in Dacia. The arrival of the Huns and later migrations. The arrival of the Huns was a defining event in European history. The Western Goths, fleeing the Huns, inflicted a major defeat on the Romans at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD. This not only altered the political landscape of the former Dacian region, but also reshaped the broader Roman world. The Huns quickly established themselves along the lower Danube, making the region their power center by 400 AD. The devastation they inflicted along the Danube River Valley in 447 AD was a critical blow to Roman influence in the region. Following the death of Attila in 453 AD, a battle at the Nadao River saw the Gepids and their allies defeat the Huns. The Gepids then took control of Dacia. The Gepids and their successors. As the heirs of the Huns, the Gepids entered into an agreement with the Eastern Roman Empire, securing peace and receiving financial stipends granted to allies. Around or after 535, Gepid power extended south of the Danube. In 567, the Avar-Lombard alliance overthrew Gepid rule. Following this, the region was referred to as Avaria, the land of the Avars, for nearly 250 years, until the early 9th century. Some of the settled Gepids remained in the area, as evidenced by cemeteries that opened in the 7th century. At the same time, Slavs began appearing in eastern Wallachia and southeastern Transylvania. However, in former Dacia, there is no archaeological evidence of Slavs prior to the mid-7th century. From that point onward, they continuously settled in mountainous and forested areas. After the collapse of Avar power in the Carpathian Basin, former Dacia fell under Bulgarian rule in 811 and remained so until the Hungarian conquest. Hungarian chronicles suggest that Transylvania was among the first regions occupied in the Carpathian Basin. Following the battles for new territories, the allied Kabars settled in Transylvania. Notably, the names of the conquering Hungarian tribes are entirely absent from this region's toponyms, a phenomenon occurring only where the Kabars lived. The large number of Bulgarian Slavic loanwords in Hungarian strongly suggests direct Hungarian-Bulgarian contact. Many of these words are religious, linking them to Eastern Christian missionary activity, such as the baptism of Gyula. In 1003, Saint Stephen waged war against the then-ruler Gyula and annexed his territory. Transylvania became an integral part of the medieval Hungarian kingdom. Throughout the Middle Ages, the region was frequently raided by eastern nomads such as the Pechenegs and Cumans, making its repopulation a constant concern. No other area in Hungary saw as many state-organized settlements. Saxons, Szekelyes, and even the Teutonic Order, temporarily, were brought in. It is also likely that the Wallachian, Romanian settlement at the very end of the 12th century or the beginning of the 13th century was part of these resettlement efforts. Romanians first appeared in the Carpathian Basin in the region of Berzenland, Tarabarse, between 1202 and 1209. The lack of Roman continuity in Dacia. After the end of Roman rule in Dacia, not even traces of Romanization can be observed. By the late 3rd century, the province underwent a complete population replacement. Another wave of population replacement followed in 375, with the arrival of the Huns. Their new inhabitants later abandoned the province. The Ostrogoths settled there in 454, followed by the Gepids, marking a third population exchange. This sequence of events indicates that not only can there be no talk of a Roman-Romanian continuity in the region, but also that no single people maintained uninterrupted settlement. None of the non-outflowing rivers of Transylvania have names predating the medieval era, with most minor rivers bearing Hungarian or Slavic names. The Hungarian conquest was itself a population-changing process. In total, 4 major population replacements took place in former Dacia. The origins of the Romanians. The Romance languages evolved from the unified Latin spoken within the Roman Empire. The lexical similarities between Romanian, Italian, and Rhaeto-Romance suggest that Latin-speaking groups in the Balkan Peninsula maintained close ties with Italians until at least 600 AD. Interestingly, Romanian shares a historical link with the Albanian language. Romanian contains Albanian loanwords, and vice versa. Many of the Balkan linguistic elements in Romanian have parallels in Albanian phonetics. The question remains, where did this coexistence occur? Albanians are not native to their present-day homeland. The first recorded mention of them in this region dates to the 9th century. The only people settled in the Roman Empire as an ethnic unit were the Carpi. Some of these settled in the province of Moesia Inferior. They had the best chances of preserving their language and identity within the empire's borders. Their descendants were likely the Albanians. The Albanian endonym Shqiptar corresponds to the Greek Skytos, suggesting a Scythian origin. The Romans, under Greek influence, called the peoples of the Black Sea's northern shores and the lower Danube Scythians around the time of Christ. The region of Albanian-Romanian coexistence was likely between the Balkan Mountains and the Danube in the 4th century. By the 5th century, Latin-speaking communities and the Carpi descendants fled southward. The Albanians withdrew into the Morava and Vardar valleys, where they encountered the linguistic influences that preceded the Dalmatian language. They remained there until the Slavic migrations of the 7th century. The development of the distinct Romanian linguistic traits occurred between the 6th and 8th centuries, south of the Balkan Mountains. Romanian ultimately developed from the Latin spoken in the Greek-speaking part of the Roman Empire. During Emperor Justinian's reign, 527 to 565, the Balkan Mountains and their southern slopes were home to late vulgar Latin speakers who likely formed the basis of the Romanian language. This was the setting and period in which Romanian, or its protoform, emerged. The Balkan Mountains also contributed to the development of the Romanians' characteristic transhumant seasonal pastoralism. For centuries, data on them remained scattered and uncertain. Notably, Romanian lacks any Bulgar-Turkic loanwords. The Bulgars occupied northeastern Bulgaria in 681, north of the Balkan Mountains. The absence of their words in Romanian suggests that the ancestors of the Romanians must have lived far south of the Balkans at that time. This is further confirmed by the fact that the Romanian language lost the Latin name for the Danube. The modern Romanian Dunărea is likely of Cuman origin, dating from around the 12th century. This loss indicates that the Romanian ancestors had been far removed from the Danube for a long time. Even in the era of South Slavic influence, 9th to 11th centuries, they remained distant from the Danube. Otherwise, they would have adopted the Bulgarian name Dunav. The migration of the Vlachs. The first certain mention of the Romanians dates to 976, when John Skylitzes recorded that Samuel of Bulgaria's brother David was killed by so-called transporting Vlachs, nomadic shepherds, near the border of modern Macedonia, Albania, and Greece. Interestingly, the Archbishopric of Ohrid, established in 1020, governed the churches of Moldavia and Wallachia until 1767. The resurgence of the Byzantine Empire allowed the Vlachs to move more freely. This mobility may have triggered their northward migration. By the late 11th century, Vlachs had reached the northern slopes of the Balkan Mountains. Over time, they became more frequently mentioned in sources, with settlements near the Danube becoming permanent. In 1185, the Second Bulgarian Empire was founded. Historical sources describe the barbarians of the Balkan region as Vlachs. Another source states that in 1189, Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, and Vlachs attacked the army of Emperor Frederick Barbarossa near Nice. However, we should not assume that Balkan Vlachs at this time were purely Romanian. Anna Comnena, 1083 to 1153, noted that all nomadic groups in the Balkans were commonly referred to as Vlachs. Many recorded Vlach personal names from this era are of Slavic origin. The Byzantine recapture of the Balkans up to the Danube set the stage for the Vlach migration. The Second Bulgarian Empire, 1185 to 86, created a context of Bulgarian-Vlach-Cuman coexistence, allowing Vlach pastoralists to gradually move north of the Carpathians. In conclusion, the Latin spoken in Dacia could not have been the precursor to the Romanian language. The province underwent multiple population replacements, and no place names preserve Roman traces. The absence of Cuman loanwords in Romanian suggests that Romanians only settled north of the Danube after the Mongol invasion. Thus, the Romanian presence north of the Danube can only be taken seriously from the latter half of the 13th century onward.